It was basically a back room with a safe.
Right.
And they open the safe up, and then there's all the stacks of money.
Yeah.
I've got a duffel bag this time in my back, probably about 2 feet. They fill this duffel bag up, and there's still stacks of money. And there's a cardboard box on the shelf. I said, get that box down. They got the box down, put the rest of it in there. And I tell them to count to 100. So I got the duffel bag on my shoulder, the cardboard box on my shoulder. I walk out, the keys are there, and I'm gone. So this time I get a hotel because I want to count everything here. $385,000.
Damn. What are you charged with?
My attorney comes in and he tells me I'm facing 84 years.
Holy shit. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Crime and Entertainment. Got a very special guest here. I seen him on Instagram a few months ago. I seen he was on our mutual friend show, OG Mike's podcast. And I said, I got to get this guy on. Please welcome Jimmy The Crease. Jimmy, how are you, my friend?
Very good, buddy. How are you?
Good, good. Glad you could make it. We had a little technical difficulties getting this thing going, but we got it, and we're fixing to put on a good show. Now, Jimmy The Crease is an interesting nickname. We're going to get to why you got that nickname, because you got it from, we'll say, doing some very proficient prolific mobsters laundry while you were doing some time in prison.
Absolutely.
So we'll get into who those guys were. Very well-known individuals in the organized crime world. But first, if you were in prison, we got to talk about how you got there. So
right,
we'll get into early life and then what kind of started your life or in the criminal aspect.
Okay.
Where did you grow up?
Okay. I'm from right outside of Dayton, Ohio. I basically lived with my dad. He was disabled, but he was a bookie.
Okay.
And my mom, they divorced when I was a baby. I'm the baby of 12 kids.
12?
Yes, but I'm my dad's only child.
Okay.
He actually married into 11 kids. Our mom was very, very abusive. So, I mean, she just wasn't a good lady. My dad was a terrific man. So as a kid, I kind of went back and forth from like who I stayed with. I was kind of like a little pawn that if she was upset at my dad, I could only go over there every other weekend.
Right.
But if everything was good, then I could go over anytime I want.
Were you closer to your father?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then when I got into a junior high, about the 8th grade, all the other kids was like grown. So my mom said I could go over to my dad's full time,
Okay.
which is what I did. So I had a good upbringing there. My mom was very poor. You can imagine raising all those kids.
Yeah, shit.
Right. And then the other father, he didn't pay any child support or anything. And my dad paid for me, but I mean, she still had to work, 2, 3 jobs.
Were you the only child from him?
I was the only child from my dad. Yeah.
Okay. Damn. So she had 11 from the next guy.
She had 11 from the previous man.
Okay.
Right. And then, so she had to work 2, 3 jobs, and she still had to be on the government assistance, because with all them kids.
Yeah, you ain't got.
So, as a kid, I didn't really think anything of it. But then when you get a little older, you kind of get a little embarrassed. And I was afraid of my friends, what they would think. So, like, I tried to, you could say maybe be something I wasn't, but I just didn't want to act like that. And then when I got into high school, I had a job and I had a car. So on the weekends with my buddies, I'm the one who would drive. I'm the one who would buy the beer because I thought if I didn't, maybe they didn't like me. And
Right.
it was all self-confidence that I just didn't have. They all liked me anyway, but that's just kind of how I felt. And that also kind of leads up into why I did what I did.
Right. Isn't it crazy how when you're young, even if you are, lower class or on the poor side of things, you don't realize it as a kid. It's a, you're just a kid. You're just enjoying life. You don't get that though. Still, you get like you said, middle school, maybe early high school. Then you start to realize there's
Fifth grade,
different.
sixth grade, you
Yeah,
kind of understand because when you have to go through the lunch line and you got to tell them you're on free lunch and they got to check your name,
yeah,
then it gets a little bit embarrassing. And also because my mom, how abusive she was, um, as a kid, I had a real bad stutter. I mean, it was like really, really bad. It wasn't really like the typical kind of stutter. It was just I couldn't get enough wind to get the words out.
right. I got you.
So sometimes today I still have it if I'm nervous or something, but I learn little tricks to where if I feel like a stammer coming on, I'll just change words of like what I'm going to say because there's certain words and there's certain like letters that pop you off, and it's like I told Mike, and he didn't know till I told him that the biggest word a stutterer stutters on is his own name.
Yeah, I heard that. I didn't know that either.
Yeah. Like, if you introduce yourself, you're thinking so much that you stutter on your own name.
That's crazy. Um, A little bit on your pops. Was he like a large time bookmaker, just, local bookmaker?
He was disabled from the post office. I had an Uncle Frank who was kind of tied in with the Youngstown people. And he got my dad as a bookmaker. Um, he was pretty big, but it was like if there was ever like big bets, he would call out to Vegas
Yeah.
and he'd
Yeah, lay it off. That's typically what those guys do so they don't get killed. Yeah.
yeah. I remember as a kid he had a little machine into the phone jack and it would spit out like a ticker tape with all the new gambling lines that like updated lines. And
Wow.
I thought that was the coolest thing.
Yeah, I don't ever know that.
Yeah, he was disabled. He had a bad heart, bad lungs, two plastic knees. He was always in and out of the hospital, but I mean, he was a terrific man. I mean, he really was.
Yeah. When I was young, I used to be with my dad. He'd done sheetrock work, but he was a heavy gambler. And he would use 2 different bookies, and he would try to middle the line. So, if he got it early, just say if the line started out at 2.5, right? And it wasn't quite the field goal yet, then he would bet it at 2.5. If it went past 3 to 3.5, he would bet the other way. And so he would try to, if it landed on 3, then you can win possibly both ways. And he would do that, and we would ride from one guy, and we would pick up an envelope, and I'm talking like, I mean, as a kid, it looked like all the money in the world, but it was probably a couple thousand, 5, 600, $700. And then we would go, around the corner up the street. He'd meet another guy and hand him that same envelope plus a few dollars if he lost. And I was like, "Why do you get this one guy and then pay another guy? Like, what's the point?" And he said, "I tried to middle the line." And he was explaining it to me as a kid. I didn't know what the hell he was talking about, but now as I'm older, I get that, and I've actually done that before, where you can win both ways and you collect from both. He said, "Look," he said, "at the end of the day, I lost, a couple of dollars." He said, "But if it had hit on a field goal, I'd have collected from both of them."
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
It's kind of funny too, because with my dad, he made his own football tickets, and there was all the bars in the Dayton area.
Oh, he killed it.
Would drive around and drop them off. But then when I was 15, my dad got me a moped and he got me saddlebags for it. And I used to drive around Dayton dropping tickets off at the park.
That's like what, the parlay cards?
Well, it was like, it had all the college games and the lines, and you do a four pick.
Yeah, yeah, well, around here, we got the same thing, we call them parlay cards or whatever, but yeah, you can do 5 on 5 or you can do up to like a 10 and win, nobody can get that. But
Yeah. And I remember when I got my first paycheck out of the pizza place that I worked at, I told my dad, I said, hey, I want to gamble. And he goes, no, you don't. And I said, yeah, I want to gamble. And he goes, how much you want to gamble? I said, I don't know, $100. You pick some games like $10 each. He said, give me your $100. So I gave him 5 20s, and he took his cigarette lighter and he lit it and he went to the money. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? He goes, I'm going to burn this. And if you could still pay your car insurance and have gas in your car and have money to go out with your friends, I'll let you gamble. I didn't gamble ever, didn't even think of it. So he taught me early. Yeah.
uh,
I was not a gambler on the street.
that's good. All right. So getting into, do you get married? Do you get into a relationship? Because I know that plays a part in how you get into the big thing.
I had about 3 years in the bar scene,
Okay.
and I was never a drug user, never touched a drug. I was a beer drinker back in the little day, and then that's when I met the girl who was going to be who, who I eventually married. Never should have married her. I mean, we were total opposites. I was attracted to big boobs and big hair, and that's what she had. You know, and then my dad, we was dating for about 3 years, and my dad got really sick, and they had to put him in hospice care. So he wanted to die at home, so they put like the hospital bed in the middle of the living room.
Yeah.
And then I moved home and I took care of him, and this was like June, and they said he only had a couple weeks to live. And he said he only wanted to see one more football season and one more Christmas. And I worked with him and worked with him, and I got him through the holidays and a football season. And he died that following June.
Wow.
And he told me, "Do not marry that woman." And he said, "She's just money hungry. Do not marry her." So after my dad died, I watched him die all alone there, with just like me and my grandma. Like, I never saw my dad and mom together, and because of his disabilities, I never saw him go on a date or anything like that. And I knew it had to be a lonely life for him.
Yeah.
And and then when he died, I guess I thought, I don't want to be like that. So 3 months later, I got married to the girl I was dating, and it was just doomed from the start. I mean, I'm very easygoing and laid back. She was high strung and like argumentative. So I was still in the pizza business, but then I got a job with JB Hunt Trucking, and they told us when we got the job, you're going to have to relocate because we have nothing in Dayton, Ohio for you.
Right.
So we was fine. So I spent about a year going back and forth up to Detroit, Michigan. I had 4 accounts I was running. And finally, after about a year, the boss calls and says, hey, it's time to move. We can't afford you in a hotel every week. So he said, it's time to move. So we drove up there. We found a nice little apartment. And then she just started crying. I don't want to move. I don't want to leave my mom. And I'm like, you got to be shitting me. So I call my boss and I go, she don't want to move. And he goes, I don't want to lose you. He says, I'll find a job for you, but you're going to have to travel every week. And I said, okay. So my wife, she was pregnant with our first son, and she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, and this job allowed it.
Right.
But it was just, I was going to be gone every week. And that's kind of the end of the marriage right there.
Right.
And then my job eventually became that you could kind of call it a grease man, maybe, to where if accounts were in trouble, they'd send me up there. I'd have an expense account. I would take the customer golfing, take them to dinner, take them to bars, keep them sloppy drunk, keep them happy. That was my job.
Yeah.
It was a great job
I know.
if you was a single man.
Yeah.
But if you have a bitchy wife at home with small, it's not a good job. And I was going to these accounts outside of Cleveland, and they like to go to the strip clubs. And there's nothing better than going to a strip club on an expense account. so I met a dancer there, and we kind of hooked up.
Of course you did.
She was she was basically, she treated me like my wife should have treated me.
Right.
And it was just a time in my life, I was 30 years old. I was in the prime of my life.
Mhm.
And so that's what I was doing. And then it was kind of a stressful job because of the travel and the bad marriage.
Now, did you and the stripper continue seeing each other?
We continued to see each other. She told me she was married. Imagine that. She lied. So she tells her husband about me, and
Oh,
he kicks her and her two daughters out on the street. So I feel responsible, kind of like my dad did.
right.
So I had to find them a little place to live. So I put them up in a little house. I got my wife and boys in Dayton, and they're up in Cleveland. And then I got passed up on a promotion that I should have got. And it just hit me because they told me the reason I didn't get it was sometimes I stuttered. And that was something that followed me my whole life.
Right.
And it just set me off, and I quit. And my boss was like, you're not quitting, you're not quitting. And I'm like, did I stutter? He goes, take the weekend off, come back to work Monday, everything's fine. Well, I waited a week till I finally came to my senses, and I tried to call him, and he's like, it was too late. The bosses said if you'd have came back, you had your job, but we couldn't hold it for you for a week. So now I'm supporting two families and no income.
Oh,
Yeah. So, and then, I started from the bottom at this company, and I worked my way up. And, as you start to advance with your pay, you get a bigger house,
right.
you get a nicer car, stuff like that.
More money, more bills.
Yeah. And I didn't have any college. So most of the people coming into this company are college graduates. So I'm not going to be able to get on anywhere else and make the money I did right there.
Yeah, I feel you.
So I went through my savings, I maxed out the credit cards, and I got desperate.
How much debt are you in at this point? Just to kind of lay some groundwork before you do this. How much debt are you in right now before we okay.
So I needed 20 grand. If I got 20 grand, I was going to be great, because that way I got the stripper and her daughters in a house. Hey, it's the same old story.
I mean, at least she's still stripping at least to give something, contribute here? Holy cow! You got a stay-at-home mom and a retired stripper. You got a retired stripper and a stay-at-home mom.
Damaged stripper and a bitchy wife at home. So so I'm going, okay. So I'm going to rob a bank. I said, I got to get some money. So I go to the bank, and I got the gun on the passenger seat, and I went in this bank 3 times just to scope it out. Got some pamphlets, walked back out, and the phone rings, and it's the stripper, and she's crying, the landlord wants the money. And I said, I got it. And I hang up. Not a second did I hang up, the phone rang again, and I thought it was her. And I go, what? And it's the wife, and she's bitching about money. And she goes, why don't you kill yourself? At least the kids would get Social Security.
Damn.
I said, I got it. So I hung up the phone, and I said, fuck it. And I grabbed the gun, and I went. And I had it planned to where I was going in at closing time, like, 2 minutes till 5. There was a teller at the door. She let me in. I was the last customer. No disguise, nothing. Let me in, locked the door, pulled the shade down. And it's just me and the 5 bank workers.
Damn. All right. So let me unpack that for a minute, Jimmy. Did you not think you needed at least a mask? Well, obviously, if you go in with a mask, they're going to be on high alert. So,
The whole thing was they had to trust me enough to let me be that last customer.
all right, that makes sense to that point. Now, where is this in location?
And I'm living in Cleveland with the stripper. I'm on the weekends with my wife down in Dayton, and I'm robbing the banks right in the middle of Ohio. So
That was
nobody knows me,
okay. All right,
nothing.
all right.
So I go in there, I take them into the vault. I'm not even hitting the teller money. I don't want anything to do with that. I want the safe. So I take all 5 of them back to the safe room. They open it up and they start handing me money. And I just start sticking it in my jacket. You know, I get done. I tell them to count to 100. Then they can come out. And I walk out. The keys are hanging in the front door. I take them with me and I take off. And I get on the highway and I start pulling this money out. And it's like 5,000, 5,000, 5,000, 5,000, $99,000
Damn.
in 5 minutes without hurting anybody.
And no alarms got tripped.
Nothing.
What year is this?
2002.
Okay, so fairly advanced. I mean, that was it near an interstate? So when you
Right close to the interstate.
and were you driving your own car? Were you in?
Driving a little Honda Civic. It was mine. I didn't have anybody with me. Back in 2002, they didn't have those bubble cameras. So, so yeah, because I'm not doing this whole stealing cars and trading cars because I'm by myself.
Right.
So, so I get it. I get the 99 grand, and I never had that kind of money before. Like I made great money with my job, but I didn't have that mad money that you could go to the mall and drop 10 grand
Yeah.
and not even worry.
You probably made good money throughout the year, but this is all right there in your hand. Right. Where did you park at? Just out of curiosity, when you done this, where'd you park?
Um, I um I parked at the bank over to the right, so I was away from the door.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So I drive back to Dayton. I give my wife $50,000. She says, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm running drugs for Uncle Frank. And she goes, don't get caught. And I said, I won't. So she's fine with that.
Yeah.
Okay. So so then I take the rest of it up to the stripper, pay all the bills, everything's good. But then you start spending it. 3 months later, I'm getting low of money. So I said, I'm going to hit another one. So I go scope out another one, do the same thing. 2 minutes till 5, hit the door. Lady lets me in, locks it, pulls the shade down. 5 women, take them to the back, empty the vault. 65,000 out of that one. I was pissed because I thought they was holding out on me.
Yeah. You
I
got.
was like, I can't believe 65 grand, man. And that's a good take. And here I'm pissed about
Yeah.
it.
You're bitching. Did you go to the vault again in that?
Well, I didn't go to like the vaults you see in the big banks. It was basically a back room with a safe,
Right.
and they open the safe up, and then there's all the stacks of money.
Yeah. Okay.
So that 65 grand, I gave half to the wife. By this time, she's bought like a safe for the house to keep the money in. And she's like, keep it coming, keep it.
Yeah. So this is 80 grand in 3 months. You didn't give this lady.
Yes. So a couple months later, start to run low. And I planned this one out. It was a little satellite national city bank back then, right in the front of a shopping center close to a highway. Do the same MO. 2 minutes till 5. The girl lets me in, pulls the shade down, goes in. There's only 2 women working. I pull out my pistol. I take them to the back. I've got a duffel bag this time in my back that's probably about 2 feet, and it's a good sized duffel bag. They fill this duffel bag up, and there's still stacks of money. And there's a cardboard box on the shelf. I said, get that box down. They got the box down, put the rest of it in there. And I tell them to count to 100. So I got the duffel bag on my shoulder, the cardboard box on my shoulder. I walk out, the keys are there, and I'm gone. So this time I get a hotel because I want to count everything here. 385,000.
Damn. And how long? What, a couple minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
5 minutes.
Dang.
And never hurt anybody. So I'm not going to keep 385 grand with a stripper. So I go home, I give my wife $200,000. Oh my God, you have never seen the woman so happy in her life, right? But it was kind of a big score, and I felt I should kind of go away for a little while because I know with that much money, they're going to be coming after me. They're going to be kind of looking because I'm in the newspapers in that area and I'm on the news, but nobody knows me. Nobody has a clue who I am. The FBI, when they finally caught me, talked to my mom and they said, we didn't have a clue who this guy was.
Did they have a lead on your vehicle at all?
No, no, nothing. So I go back up to the stripper, give her a little bit of the money, just like 10 grand. And I said, I'm going to take off for a bit. I'll be back in about a week. So I drive down to Florida. I got 180 grand in the passenger seat with me. So after a couple days, I'm trying to call home to talk to my boys, and nobody answered. Finally, 10 o'clock at night, the wife answers and says, it's all over, Jim. I called the FBI. And I'm like, you did what? The stripper's husband found my name in the Dayton phone book and called my wife and said, I think your husband's living with my wife. So out of spite, she called the FBI. Now, this is a woman who thinks I'm running drugs, run dope, but I'm banging a stripper and I'm an asshole, right? So she calls the FBI. They come, they see the money. She gives them $200,000, gives it to them. And they know it's bank robbery money. They show her the picture. They go, yeah, that's him. So now they got the name to go with the face. So I told her, okay, see ya. So I take off. I'm on the run for 11 days, heading out west. And she keeps calling me. And this is back in 2002 to where all the cell phones were kind of new.
Right.
So she would call me and put my little boy on the phone to talk to me while the FBI tracked me.
Yeah, they would triangulate the signal because you got to stay on there for a certain amount of time.
Exactly.
Damn.
And for some stupid reason, I wanted to see the Grand Canyon. Don't ask me why. I just wanted to see the Grand Canyon. So I drive to Flagstaff, Arizona. I go into the Grand Canyon Park, pay my $20. I pull off at the first little side to get out and look at it. Look for like 30 seconds and like, okay, that's it, time to go. And there was a guy there, I noticed. He had like a Hawaiian shirt and sunglasses and a big old floppy mustache. I'm going, look at this joker, you know? So I get back in the car and I'm driving out of the Grand Canyon. I'm starting to develop a plan. I'm thinking maybe I can get to Vegas, get some new papers, and disappear. So I'm driving through the park. I'm smoking a cigarette, and a park ranger comes past me. And as soon as he passes me, I throw the cigarette out the window. And he flips around with the lights on, and I'm thinking, oh, shit, I threw a cigarette out. Brush fires, my bad. So I look back at him and look forward, and there's a roadblock. There's like 6 cars. I hit the brakes, and 15 FBI agents come out of the woods with sticks on their hats and machine guns. And oh my God, they thought I was Dillinger. I mean, they came out in force. So that's when I got arrested. And when they put me in the car with the FBI, that guy in the Hawaiian shirt with the floppy mustache comes up with my picture and is like, "Is this you?" I said, "Yeah." He was an FBI agent. So
How did they track you that you were gonna be there? Did you tell your kid you were going there?
no, I didn't tell anybody. They just tracked me through the towers,
Okay.
and they saw about where I was at. They didn't know if I was going to be there, but so they gave pamphlets out to the people at the front there to say, if this guy comes through, this guy's wanted for bank robbery.
Uh,
When I got to the first entrance and I paid my $20, then they knew who I was.
yeah, then they called, let them know.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just a chance. They said, well, he's in Flagstaff. There ain't nothing in Flagstaff but the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
So,
So I apologize if I missed this part of it, but when you done the bank robbery, did you have a weapon?
yes,
Okay, so you're brandishing a weapon. You've
yes,
now stolen in excess of $500,000 or pretty close to it.
over 500,000. Yeah.
Over 500,000. What are you charged with?
Um, they charged me when I got back to Ohio and they come, my attorney comes in and he tells me I'm facing 84 years.
Holy shit.
And I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't kill nobody. And he goes, you got to understand the guns. He said brandishing a gun at a bank is an automatic 7.
Right.
That's the first one.
Yeah.
Then each additional one is 25. So he said you're facing 57 years just on gun charges alone.
Damn, it's 20 years for each additional?
25
25. Holy shit, I didn't know that.
if you brandish a gun in a bank.
Damn, you better off to rob it with a fucking note.
But yeah, but you ain't gonna get the money with the note.
Right, yeah. I get the intimidation of the firearm. Maybe on one and done, if you got 87, that's possible, but holy shit, 25 years per charge?
Didn't know anything about that. I
Right,
mean, here I'm thinking I might get 8 or 10 years.
right. But that's like you said, that's just the gun charge. That ain't even counting the bank robbery.
Right. So what ended up happening was as the attorney comes to me and he says, "Okay, they're offering you 18 years." I said, "No way." And he goes, "Well, what do you think you should get?" I said, "I'll do 10." And he says, "Well, let me talk to him and I'll come back." So he comes back 2 weeks later and he's got that, sentencing guidelines, the federal sentencing
Right,
guidelines. And he shows me. He says they're going to throw out 2 of the gun charges. So you've got 84 months, with the feds, everything's months.
right.
So he's like, you got 84 months right off the rip.
Yep,
And he said, and they're going to charge you with all 3 banks, but they're going to do the points on the one you got the most money out of.
right,
So the baseline for bank robbery is a level 20.
right.
And they enhance you they enhance you a point for every $50,000.
Really?
Yeah. So with the 385 I got, those were some enhancements. So it fell into the guidelines of 87 to 103 months. And he told me that he feels that because it's my first time and I'm already getting 84, he thinks the judge will give me the low end of the 87. So that's like 171 months. And I said, so how much time am I going to do? He goes, 12, 13. I said, is this the best I can do? He said, this is all you're going to get. He says, this is it. I said, well, I guess if I can do 10, I can do 13.
But you do 85% of that, right? So you're still gonna
Percent. But you can, lose a little good time and
you get good time, what, like 54 days a year, good time,
days a year. Yeah.
and then there's different things you can do while you're in there. You were probably out by the time the sentencing guidelines changed, and I don't even know if that would have affected your charge anyway. But
They did a lot of stuff on like, on dope cases, but
Yeah, dope case. That's where I'm referencing that from, was a dope case I covered.
yeah, see, they don't do anything for crimes of violence, and
Okay.
then that's what I'm considered. I'm considered, theft and violence.
Okay. So, I mean, you're still going to wind up doing about 10 ish. My math is not very great, but 85% of the time you're going to do 10, 11, somewhere along in there.
I did 13 on it.
Really?
Yes,
You must have had some,
some good time every now and
I was about to say, you must have had some slip ups in there.
yeah.
Okay. So you,
So
so you eat that before we go further in your time in prison, is your relationship with your wife completely severed?
oh yeah, oh yeah, it's done.
What about the stripper?
Well, she lasted about 6 months, and then she was gone.
Did she keep any of the money that you got?
She actually had $60,000 hidden in the dryer in a load of towels when the FBI came.
And they didn't find it?
No, no, they didn't even look. She was probably banging them. I don't know, but
That's actually a pretty damn smart place to put it, though. I mean,
yeah, talk about laundering the money. Yeah.
all things considered, that's a pretty damn smart place to put. I can't believe your wife dimed you out. I understand being mad, but damn, that costed her $200,000 to dime you out, bro.
You know what? I was more mad that she gave the money because I would have never told the feds
Right?
the money to my wife. I got three little boys. That could have been theirs.
Yeah, that could have, like you say, even if she got you arrested, shit, giving up the money is nuts.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow. Okay.
I guess that's a woman scorned, isn't it?
You damn right.
Yeah, and it wasn't even a marriage, really. It was a partnership.
Partnership. Yeah.
What's she care if I got a stripper?
That makes it worse.
Yes,
All right. So where's your first stop in your prison?
my first stop is Butner, North Carolina,
Okay.
at the Federal Medical Center.
Okay.
They have a work cadre there,
Yep.
and I go in there, and I get a job as a inmate companion,
Okay.
which means you help people who aren't able to do certain things.
Right.
And they put me on the psych wing. There was 6 psych units, so I worked with the psych patients. The guys that aren't very high functioning. I would like help them with their laundry, try to get them to take showers and stuff, help them clean their room, stuff like that.
Right.
That was my job, and lot of sick people. I mean, it's almost like the place that people forgot. I mean,
Yeah.
these guys. I mean, they don't watch TV, they don't talk on the phone, nothing. But that is where I met Russell Weston. He was the Capitol Hill shooter back in the 90s who had a shootout with the Capitol Hill police.
Yeah. He was trying to assassinate somebody or something, right?
Yeah, he was trying to assassinate Congressman Tom DeLay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he killed a Capitol Hill guard, and he killed undercover officer. He got shot about 5 times himself,
Man.
so he was in a wheelchair, and they was trying to deem him if he was competent enough. And I guess still to this day, they haven't found him competent. So he's still at the medical center. So
There's some of these people in there, like obviously I know some of them are really off in the head, but is some of these people or anybody that you run across like jiving the system?
absolutely. At the medical center, when some guys are in the trial process and they're trying to do a psych thing, they'll send them to Butner for 6 months to get evaluated.
Right.
And I mean, they'll weed them out real quick and say, there's nothing wrong with this guy, send him back. Just like with Russell Weston. Now, he would talk to people. He didn't talk to many, but when he did, he would say like outlandish things. Like we'd be watching football and he'd say he won the Heisman Trophy and he laughed and everything. But when it was just me and him, he didn't talk like that.
Right.
So I personally think Mr. Weston is pretty much doing that because he's got it made at that medical center. And if you remember what happened to John Hinckley, eventually he got to go home.
Yeah.
And the doctor, Dr. Sally Johnson, who treated Hinckley, was the one treating Mr. Weston.
I mean, he's like a doctor that people want to try to get a hold of to find that insanity plea. He shot what, Reagan, right?
Yeah, yeah. He shot Reagan. Hinckley did. Yeah. And he's home now.
I didn't know he got out.
Yeah, they put him in a outside hospital, and then he got to have, like, weekend visits going home, and eventually, yeah.
So is Butner, I don't know, I've never been to prison. I was facing quite a long time there, but I've never been, thank goodness. Is Butner like a low, a medium? Is it multiple?
Butner is a complex.
Okay.
They got a federal prison hospital, they got a camp, they got a low, they got a medium, and then when I was there, they was building another prison, which they called the FCI2, which was kind of like a medium but higher security medium.
Okay.
So there was like 5 different prisons on these grounds.
And so all things considered, it's not a terror. I mean, prison's prison, but not a terrible place to wind up.
At the time, Butner was the spot to be. Butner was a sweet spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't Madoff there. Madoff was there, wasn't he?
Yeah, yeah. Bernie got there right after I left.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't get to meet him, but he got there right after I left. They kind of put a lot of the high profile guys there,
Right.
and especially people who were sick because they had the hospital right there, so they would keep them at the medium.
Yeah.
So after about a year, um, you you get tired of that job because working with all those psych people and everything, it kind of wears on you.
Yeah. Make you
And
crazy.
yeah, so I told him, I said, listen, I said, I've been a year here. I said, can I transfer? And they said, you want to go over to the medium here? I said, sure. So, like, 2 days later, I got packed out and I went to the medium.
When you're doing this, do you get any sort of special treatment? And by that, I mean like different type of cell, any sort of privileges when you're working with these people?
It was one of the higher paying jobs.
Okay.
Like, I made $60 a month, which is a good paying job in the feds.
Right.
But I mean, you don't get anything special. I mean, like that. So when I got to the medium, and I'm in R&D, the captain comes in and he tells everybody that there's a sex offender program at the medium. He says they got a unit that is all sex offenders, and it's a treatment program. And they said if you touch any of them, you'll be charged with a hate crime and you'll be shipped.
Yep.
Yes. They also had a step down unit for the mental health guys, and that's for guys who was at hospitals, but they deem that they're getting a little better. So they're going to put them at Butner because it's an easier spot and let them get acclimated to the prison setting. But, they live on their own unit.
Right.
So, yeah. So that's when I got to Butner. And first day, I got to the unit, and, I kind of look Italian. So people come ask me what I'm in for and stuff, and tell them I'm Italian. So this guy Tommy comes up to me. He's an Italian guy, and he tells me who all's on the compound. He said Carmine Persico was there, the Colombo Boss. Um, Joey Testa was there, one of the Gemini Twins.
Yes.
So there was a couple high profile people. I don't know if you know who John Pollard was.
The name sounds familiar.
John Pollard was the naval intelligence officer who was convicted for giving military secrets to
Yeah. Espionage, charge of espionage. Yeah.
um and actually, Obama pardoned him, and he got out, and he's in Israel. So I knew John Pollard. He was a very nice guy, probably one of the nicest guys you would meet. So he was there.
Did he just get paid to do that? Or did he just get paid a lot of money to do that, or did he tell you?
He got paid. He was Jewish, so he thought he was doing a solid.
Okay, it was some religious factors there. What was there a man there, John Conley?
I am horrible with names.
He was the guy that was, I think he was FBI. I'm not positive, but he was the guy that was basically in cahoots with Whitey Bulger, that was letting Whitey Bulger operate the Winter Hill Gang out of Boston. And when they went down, I'm pretty sure that was his name, John Conley. He got arrested, and I'm about 99% sure he went to Butner. He was the guy that was basically hand in hand with Whitey Bulger.
Yeah. If he did, he probably got there after I left,
Okay.
or they might have put him at the low,
Okay.
something like that. I mean, the name doesn't really ring a bell for me.
Okay. Well, Carmine Persico, for a lot of people that watch this channel, are definitely going to know that name. And for people that don't watch this channel a lot, or maybe don't know a lot about the mob, the Colombo Boss, Carmine Persico, they called him the Snake, but he was not to be trifled with. He was a very, very dangerous man on the street, and he got, I think, a life sentence in the commission trial when a lot of the bosses went down. He, which was a little odd, defended himself. Yeah, but you don't typically see that. But yeah, that was strange. But what was he like, man?
Carmine Carmine was like a father to me.
Really?
He was he was probably the best person I've ever met in prison. I put him on the same pedestal as my own father. Um, I don't know why,
You're good.
but I'll kind of tell you a little bit. So I go to dinner that first night, and they introduced me to this older white guy. Um, he comes up to me. He was a bookie, so I talk about my dad and everything, and we kind of hit it off. And he goes, "Well, after dinner, come on out to the yard, meet the guys." I said, "Okay." So after dinner, I go out, and they all hang out at the bocce courts. There's a couple bocce courts. So he takes me there, introduces me to some of the guys, calls over Joey Testa. I meet Joey. He was a nice guy. Um, and then Toothpick looks at me and goes, "Well, are you ready to meet the boss?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess." So they had an officer shack there, and they had rose bushes all around it, and Carmine's job was those rose bushes. So I see this old man doing the flowers. So Toothpick takes me over, and he goes, "Carmine, want you to meet Jimmy here." So Carmine gets up, and I'm like, "Oh my God, it's Carmine Persico." I'm like shaking.
You knew who he was?
Yeah, I got my knees shaking. I'm like, I'm thinking I'm going to crap my pants or something. And so he goes, puts his hand out and shakes it, and he goes, "What you in for, Jimmy?" And of course, right then, I'm a stuttering prick. And I go, book, bank robbery. And he goes, "Jesus, I hope you used a note." So we kind of got a laugh about that. And he goes, "Well, I'll talk to you in a bit." So I kind of walk away with Toothpick, and he goes, "He must really like you." And I said, "How come?" He goes, "He don't joke with people like that often." And I go, "Well, I guess that's a good thing." So that next day, I don't have a job yet. So after breakfast, I go out to rec. Carmine's at the flower bed. He calls me over. He says, "Hey, you shop commissary?" I said, "Well, to be honest with you, I don't really have a lot of help. So I got to get a job first." And that he goes, "Well, they sell vegetables and stuff at the commissary, like, tomatoes, onions, peppers." He
Yeah.
says, "And they got a limit what you could buy." He
Yeah.
goes, "How about if I have a little money put on your books and you get some vegetables for me, and then what's left over, get the stuff that you need. And I go, okay. So he gets my information, my name and my number. So that night, right before dinner, I check my account. I got $100. So I go eat and I go out to rec. Carmine calls me over and he gives me a commissary list. And I'm looking at it and there's like $18 worth of stuff. And I said, Carmine, there's only $18 worth of stuff here. He goes, yeah, that's all I need. I said, well, you want me to go again for you next week? He goes, no. He goes, get what you need. I said, are you sure? He goes, yeah. He said, you're going to need a radio to watch TV. He said, get your hygiene and everything. Get what you need. That's fine. And I'm like, okay, I didn't really feel bad, but I guess, he wants to do that for me. He wants to do that for me.
Yeah.
So we would talk, and he liked to play pinochle, and I liked to play pinochle, and Toothpick liked to play pinochle. So we'd play three-handed at the table. And it was about a week after I was there, and we're talking, and we was talking about the movie The Godfather. I'm sure Carmine was very influential in the making of The Godfather.
Him and
Like,
Joe. Yeah.
yeah, like James Caan and them would hang out with Carmine,
Yeah.
and they would learn. And then the guy who played Luca Brasi was an actual
Mobster. Yeah.
mob guy,
Yeah.
and it
I forgot his name right off the top of my head, but I know who you're talking about. He was a real
Lenny
dude.
Montana.
Lenny Montana. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he played Luca Brasi, and it's funny because Carmine told me that scene where they show Luca going over what he's going to say to Don Corleone. They said that was actually him rehearsing his lines, and they filmed it, and they thought it was great to keep it in. But that was actually him doing his lines.
Yeah.
So they kept it in the movie. So we talked all about The Godfather and everything. So then one night he kind of looks at me and he goes, how'd they catch you anyway, Jimmy? I said, well, my wife turned me in. And he looked at me and he says, what? I said, my wife turned me in and she gave the feds $200,000. He goes, wait a minute. Your wife called the FBI on you. And I go, yeah. I said, and then when I was on the run, she had my little boys call me and talk to me so the feds could track me. And he had this look on his face, and I guess that was the snake look.
Yeah.
And he's like, that bitch got to go, Jimmy. He goes, I don't hurt women. He said, but that bitch has got to go. He goes, no woman, I don't care how many strippers you was banging, no woman calls the feds on their husband and then turns the money in. And I said, well, listen, I said, believe it or not, she's a great mother. I said, I'm going to be gone a long time. I said, she's the mother to my boys. And he goes, okay, but I tell you what, when that youngest one turns 18, she's gone. So about a week later, we're playing pinochle again. He reaches down in his bag and he puts an envelope in front of me. And I open it up and there's pictures. And there's pictures of my wife with her boyfriend. Then there's pictures of my wife's house.
Damn.
And he looks at me and he goes, just in case you change your mind.
Oh.
In a week's time, he had people from New York to Dayton, Ohio, finding where she lived and taking pictures. Just in case I ever wanted to have her whacked.
That's the reach them guys got, man. It's people. I don't think people that aren't really in the know about that don't really have a clue of the reach and the resources that they have. And the Colombos especially was very instrumental in getting The Godfather made.
Yes.
Joe Colombo, he actually dealt, and it was part of a deal they cut that, and I didn't even realize this because you think of The Godfather and you think of all the other stuff, you just associate the word mafia with it.
Right.
You know, the word mafia is never used in The Godfather.
Yeah, they could not use the word mafia or something else. I don't know if it was
Cosa
the
Nostra?
Cosa Nostra or what.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean they didn't want that kind of image
correct.
portrayed on them.
That was
So
Joe
so they was
Colombo's
really
influence. Yeah.
they basically told them what they could and couldn't do.
Yep.
And they also told them you're going to put some of our people in it. Like the
Yes.
guy who played Johnny Fontaine.
Yep.
He was a mob guy.
He was a mob guy.
Yeah.
I don't know how true it is because some people say his stories are embellished. But what's the guy that played shit, I'm blanking on his name. The one that they killed at the end. He was dating his sister.
Oh yeah. Paul.
Fuck, I've
Um,
interviewed the guy and I can't
yeah,
remember.
yeah,
Gianni
yeah. The
Russo.
guy
Gianni
who,
Russo.
yeah,
Yeah,
he was a
Gianni
mob guy
Russo.
too.
Yeah, allegedly, yes.
Yeah. Well, isn't he the one he wrote a book about being in the mafia and being in that movie?
Well, I know he claims to have been a groom by Frank Costello,
Yeah.
had a sexual affair as a teenager with Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
He killed Pablo Escobar's number two, was flown out to Colombia, strung up on a chain,
Yeah.
almost killed. Pablo recognized him, asked him to recite some lines from The Godfather, let him go. I mean, look, this could all very much be true. It is a tall tale in
Yes.
the sense of without a lot of proof, it's hard to swallow.
Yeah.
But he's a nice guy. I've
Yeah.
interviewed him. He's got some out there stories, but look, what you can't knock is the fact that he was in The Godfather.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and he was a very intricate part. And according to him, like he kind of pulled Brando. This is a story he told me. Because he was unknown, he hadn't acted before, and everything ended up giving that part to someone else. And so he goes over to Brando and he said, "Hey, listen, if you fuck this up for me, I'll rip your heart out." He's like, "You better not fuck this role up for me." And he said, Brando looked at him and was like, "That's great." He's like, "You can really play this role. That was great acting." And he said he thought I was acting. He was like, "I was serious. I was ready to kill him." But you know, who knows exactly the validity of that? But I mean, he was Carlo from The Godfather.
Yeah. I know Carmine. He used to talk about James Caan a lot because
Yeah.
James Caan used to hang out with him.
Oh yeah,
Um,
he would get really into those roles. Even when he played Thief in the movie Thief, he was
yeah.
hanging out with some mob guys from Chicago. And the reports that I heard, he was hanging with some real guys that were about to pull an actual fucking robbery
Yeah.
to see how they planned it, how they did it, and was thinking about going along with them. I mean, you talk about method acting, and
Yeah.
the FBI contacted him because they were surveilling these guys, and they was like, "Hey, don't go on this robbery because if we pinch them, you're going down with it. Don't go on this robbery."
Yeah.
And at the last minute, I guess he had to back out, but he was very, very close to a lot of those guys.
Yeah. I remember Carmine told me that James Caan thought that Carmine was going to kill him one night because I guess they're in this bar and Carmine has got a date with him and she's like a younger woman. And I guess a couple of the other mob guys was there with James Caan and they said, "Yeah, Carmine's in the back with his daughter. You should go back and pay respects." And James Caan walked back there and said, "Hey, Carmine, your daughter's beautiful." And Carmine's like, "This ain't my daughter."
I've I've heard that story.
That was hysterical. He said Jimmy Caan was just shaking, so scared.
I bet he was, man.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people say a lot of things about Carmine, and you get the name the Snake. You can imagine things that he might have had to do
Yes.
on the street, but seemingly, and I'm guessing too, when you're in prison, you let that go a little bit. You're still a gangster at heart, but seemingly, like it seems like he's a good dude, all things considered.
See, that's kind of one of the biggest reasons why that I'm even doing this stuff
Right,
is because I want people to know a different side of Carmine.
right,
I mean, he treated me like a son.
right.
And I mean, he was, I mean, he taught me how to do time when I was starting a prison bit, and I got all this time ahead of me. And
What did he teach you? How do you teach somebody to do time?
I mean, you just like you kind of teach them. Like he told me something, and I remember I would pass it on to people, and I would say, "Man, how do you do all this time?" And he goes, "I tell you what." He goes, "You pick one thing a week that you look forward to." He says, "And it don't matter what it is. It could be a TV show. It could be a thing of ice cream at the commissary. But you got one thing to look forward to every week." And he said, before you know it, the weeks they start clicking. And I remember I would call home every now and then to talk to my boys. And one time I called home and my wife said she had a live-in boyfriend. And she said that my boys were uncomfortable talking to me with that guy there. So she didn't want me to call anymore. So I went out to rec, and I was kind of upset about that. And Carmine knows I'm upset, and he calls me over, and we're talking, and I tell him, and he looks at me, and he goes, "Look," he goes, "you got to let those boys have a life." He said, "You say she's got a good mother." He said, "You got all this time to do. These boys are growing up. They probably don't even have memories of you." And
Yeah.
he said, "Let them enjoy their childhood without worrying about a dad in prison." He said, "You could send them birthday cards and Christmas cards and send them a letter every now and then. And if she decides to give it to him, that's on her." He goes, "But you got to let the street go, and you got to let those boys enjoy their childhood." And he was right. I did. And once I let that go, it was like, okay, now I can concentrate on my prison bid.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to think about, but when you put yourself in that situation, he's not wrong.
No, no, and it was just the things he would talk to me about. Just it's like you can't even. It's just like life's lessons. How he would talk to me. We might take a lap around the track, and we just talk about, like, like my childhood and stuff. He didn't really talk a lot about his family. He talked to me about how he grew up, and he was in a gang as a kid and everything. And so he talked about that, and then he didn't really talk about like his son's alley boy or anything. He didn't really
Outdoor,
talk about that. Um, he basically talked about himself, and then about me and my life, and basically, how I gotta do time, how I gotta be a man, and just certain things. There's a couple funny things that some people might not think is funny, but I'm sitting with him at lunch one day, and it's a Wednesday, and on Wednesdays in the feds you get hamburgers and French fries, right? So I get my plate and I go sit with him at the table, and I'm eating this hamburger, and I said, "Man, this thing's good." He goes, "Go back up and get you another one." I said, "No, man, I don't want to get in trouble." He said, "You robbed banks, for Christ's sake." He said, "You gave your life away. Now you're afraid to go get another hamburger?" So he looked at the guard and he goes, "Hawkins, bring Jimmy a hamburger." And the guy bought me 3 hamburgers over. But he's like, "I can't believe you." And I'm going, you're right, because it's weird, because you don't want to lose the little things you got in prison,
yeah,
but you'll throw your life away.
on the outside, yeah.
Yes. And I remember when I was walking with Toothpick one time, and I asked him, I said, "Why does Carmine like me like he does?" He said, "Well, his son, he's got a lot going out on the streets, and,
Yeah.
he's going to probably be in prison." And I said, "Carmine kind of looks at you like that." And I said, "I tell you what, he checked you out as soon as he started talking to you." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Yeah." He said, Carmine came up to me one day and he says, "Do you know the money that kid got out of them banks?" He said, that kid has got balls. I don't know how he fits them in his pants. He said, I have never heard of a bank robber getting that much money by himself. He goes, if that kid was with me, he'd have been an earner. And and then I mean, he was just I mean, I just really can't even put a point on it. He was good to me. And and then the laundry came with the Jimmy the Crease. Do you want to hear that?
I definitely want to hear that, but I want to kick in one story real quick. So
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just something with these Colombo guys or what it is, but I've had the privilege of speaking with on a couple of occasions a gentleman named Chris Colombo.
Okay.
He is the son of Joe
Yes.
Colombo. He's very speaks very highly of his father, as he should. The quotes and the life lessons that Chris has spit out over our time knowing each other, which has now been slightly over a year, and he's invited me to his home. I've slept in his house, which was Joe Colombo's house in upstate New York. He's been nothing but a 100% true gentleman to me. But just the things that he spit out, the sayings, the life lessons that his father taught him, that he's teaching his kids, that he's teaching the youths today. I mean, it's just something about it. Just like it's a old school foundation with
Yes.
principles that are held in high regard, but they're nowhere around these days, if that makes any sense.
Oh no, no, no. I mean, it's those older guys. I mean, they would take you under their wing if they
Yeah.
knew you was a good guy,
Yeah.
and if you wasn't into any crap, you
Yeah.
know, they would really and and I mean, it's stuff that you're going to carry with you for the rest of your life.
Right.
It just the talks. I can't even I can't even talk about how many. It was like, he loves Sinatra. And I told him that my dad, he was a big Sinatra fan. And he's like, okay, every Saturday night at 9 o'clock, we could pick up a station out of Philadelphia. And it's called Saturday Night with Sinatra. And they play one of his concerts. He
Wow.
goes, you listen to it, and then we'll come out Sunday morning and have coffee and talk about it. I mean, that was like how it was. I mean, it was just. I mean, I loved him like a father, and I mean, I'm not saying he loved me like a son, but I know he liked me a whole lot.
Right. All right. So Jimmy the Crease.
Jimmy the Crease. So they knew I didn't really have a lot of money because even when I got into Unicor as a bank robber, I owe restitution. They take half my
Right.
pay. So Carmine comes up to me and says, "Hey, would you like to do our laundry?" And I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Just our khaki uniforms. You wash our khakis, you iron them." He says, "I like the creases down the middle, like the collar creased, the big crease in the pants." He says, "You do a good job. You do all of us." So it was Carmine, it was Joey, um, it was Toothpick, and this other Italian guy. So I said, "Okay, I'll try it." So Carmine gives me a uniform. So I take it to the unit, I wash it, and I spend an hour ironing this uniform. I mean, I got these suckers tight, right? So I take it over to his unit on a coat hanger, and he comes out and he holds it up and he's like, Jesus, I never saw creases like this before in my life. He goes, "You're Jimmy the Crease. That's your name from now on. Jimmy the Crease." And he goes, "And if you got the in your nickname, you're special, kid." And it followed me through prison. That's the only tattoo I got is Jimmy the Crease.
That's awesome, man.
Followed me all through prison.
And you stayed doing their laundry?
Yeah, and it was weird. There was four of them, and laundry guys in prison, they might make a book of stamps a month, which is like
Right.
$7. Each of the four of them paid me $50 a month just to do their khakis.
Damn.
And I knew that was Carmine's way of taking care of me
Right.
because he'd always ask me, you need anything? You good? I said, yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. So I knew that was his way of taking care of me and still letting me keep my pride a little bit.
Right. You're having he's not giving it to you, you're still working for it.
Exactly.
Right. Was he still giving you that money in the commissary to buy his extra things? Because I do know that that's a thing. People can only put so much money on their books. So if you have somebody that has access to a lot of cash, they'll do that. They'll get other people and say, "Hey, I'll give you this." You know, you
He
they
he
whack it up with a percentage.
he did that for about 6 months until they stopped selling the vegetables.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Right.
and then Carmine would cook. He'd cook every Sunday. He'd make like a great big bowl of pasta, and sometimes he'd have pepperoni or sausage in it. Other times they had packs of octopus and stuff. He'd put octopus in it, and he'd kind of make this sauce, and oh, it was delicious. And every Sunday he'd send a big bowl up to me, and
How are you cooking all this shit, bro? Like I said, I've never been to prison, so I
yeah,
don't know. I don't have any sort of firsthand knowledge, but like I've seen Goodfellas where they got it made. They're living in a fucking
yeah,
hotel and they're
yeah.
doing all this shit. But then I've seen like Oz where you're in these cells and it's confined.
Well,
How do you do all
they
that?
had they had they had microwaves on the unit, so you could cook pasta in the microwave. You could get the
Okay,
water hot enough to cook it, and then they sold stuff at the commissary. But with Carmine, the meats and stuff, he'd get that from the kitchen. They would bring him anything he wanted. If he kind of wanted a bag of chicken, they'd bring him chicken.
he had
So
that place
just
wired.
yeah, so just every Sunday it was pasta day, and he'd always send a big old bowl up to me, and oh my goodness, just how good it was. And I mean, he was just a really good man. I saw the snake one time, and this is a quick story I'll tell you. I told you about the sex offender
Right.
treatment program. So I'm in Unicor, and we had a real cool boss there. He'd come over and talk to us and shoot the shit. He's a Notre Dame fan. I'm a Notre Dame fan. And so he would talk about his kids playing baseball and stuff. So out of the blue, my ex-wife sends me a couple pictures of my boys, and he just started playing baseball. So I take the pictures into work, show my friends. The boss comes over, I shows him my boy. I'm proud of my kid, and I'm not paying attention to anything. So when we're leaving the thing, I hear, "Hey, Jimmy the Crease." I turn around, and it's this pedophile, and he walks up to me and he goes, "Hey, I know you don't get a lot of money, but there's some guys on the unit who would pay for those pictures." And I grab this dude by the neck and throw him against the wall, and I'm going to kill him. I mean, I'm going to choke him right there to death. People pull me off, and he leaves. I go back to the unit, and I go to dinner, and somebody comes up to me and says, "Carmine wants you on the yard right now." He goes, "Don't even finish dinner." So I go out there, and I could tell he's pissed. And I walk up to him, and he goes, "What the hell are you thinking?" I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Why are you touching one of these pedophiles?" And I told him. He says, "I don't care." He goes, "What'd they tell you? They're going to charge you with a hate crime, and they're going to ship you out of here. You want to get shipped out of here?" I said, "No." He said, "You want more time?" I said, "No." He says, "You come to me when anything like that happens." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I mean, because he's kind of scolding me here." And I'm
Yeah.
like, "Okay, I'm sorry." So there was a there was a black guy who just got to the compound. He came out of a penitentiary, and he didn't like being on the medium. It was a big difference for him. He said the respect factor was bad, so he wanted to go back to the pen. He didn't want to be there. So he was in Unicorn, and this one day he walks in with like one of the yard gloves from, like, the yard guys, and I guess he had a razor blade in his middle finger. And he walked up to that pedophile and he sliced his face open, and it was like a fish. It just opened up. I mean, talk about cutting him to the white meat. popped open. So they
Dang.
all the cops jumped the guy, take him to the hole. And that night I go out and I talked to Carmine, told him what happened. He goes, huh, that guy's always going to have a reminder, ain't he? And I go, yeah, I guess so. And he never told me, but the others told me Carmine paid that guy $500 to get that pedophile because what he said to me.
And that kind of money goes a long way in prison, man. And when you got somebody that's got the access to the kind of cash that he had, obviously nobody wants to be in prison for life, but it at least makes it easier in there.
Yeah, and I mean the guy was wanting to go back to the pen anyway,
Right. So he did him a favor, yeah.
so he got shipped back to the pen and he got $500 to go with him.
And that guy got a lesson, you got a little revenge,
And
and you
that
see
guy
how
got his
things work.
face split open from like temple to mouth. I I never seen anything like that. It was cut so deep it didn't even bleed. That
Damn, yeah, that's deep.
yeah. I mean you could see the white meat.
Whew. What's some of the
Yeah.
worst things you've seen in there?
That was one of them
Yeah,
right there. I was at another prison where I saw some of the Mexicans. You know, usually when the Mexicans go after somebody, they don't go at them one on one.
yeah.
They they come in bunches. So I saw like five of them get this other Mexican guy, and I walked over there, and it looked like somebody slaughtered a pig. All the blood. I mean, and then at the last prison I was at, Beckley in West Virginia, New Year's Eve, 2023, going into 24, somebody got stabbed and killed right next to me
Damn.
with a big old spike right into the back twice. Got his lungs, and the one got his lungs and it pierced his heart. And because now all them young kids have knives. Nobody fights anymore in the feds.
Yeah,
They all got knives because
yeah,
the feds picked up every charge with a gun. So you got all these little gangbangers who wouldn't even have been in the feds 10 years ago.
right.
And they all carry knives. So,
So
yeah, I
I
mean,
I
I've seen a lot of stabbings,
I know
you
I'd
know.
heard you on Mike's podcast talk about that you mentioned that microwave, that there were situations where people would heat up stuff in microwaves and
Absolutely. They would heat Vaseline or baby oil and they would throw it on somebody. And this one time they threw it on somebody's face and it started melting the skin.
oh, fuck.
Now, that's what I think is the reason they took the microwaves out. They say it was just the upkeep of them. But I mean, you got guys heating stuff up in there.
Damn, you heat up baby oil and throw it on somebody? Holy shit.
Yes, because
Wow.
I mean that'll melt the skin.
Surprised Diddy didn't do all that with all the baby oil he had.
Well, man, you know what? That's something too. Man, I bet you he's going to get in there, and I bet you they're going to treat him like a king.
Oh, yeah.
You
Yeah, I'm
know,
sure.
you
W
know.
One of the guys that you mentioned, and I wanna circle back to him because people may not recognize the name, but he's actually out now, so we gotta talk about it a little
Joey,
bit. Joey Testa.
yes,
For people that don't know, he was one of the people that or one of the individuals that they referred to as the Gemini Twins.
yes,
Him and Anthony Center,
yes.
and they basically work for,
DeMeo,
Roy DeMeo, and I mean, these guys killed half a fucking borough in New York. I mean, probably in the hundreds, all said and done, and they're both out. They're
yes,
out. They're free.
yes. And they had that apartment right next to the Gemini Lounge where they would kill the people, then they would drain the blood in the bathtub, and then they
Yep.
would dismember them.
Yeah, they would cut the neck, cut the carotid artery or whatever, hang them upside down where all the blood would drain out, then go in, cut up the bodies and get rid of them. And their whole thing was no body, no crime.
No body, no crime. They'd be cutting them up, eating pizza and stuff.
Dude, I just want to put this into perspective, right? You robbed 3 banks. They were trying to give you 87 years. I think they finally convicted them on like 20 murders, but God knows
Yes.
I know it's way more than that. And I don't know how many years total they did, but they're out now.
Yeah.
And both of these guys are out. And I mean, look, I'm not you know, that's a lot of people you kill, man.
Uh,
And then both of these guys are out, like, Jesus, that's you got to question that a little
Listen,
bit.
if you would have asked me 20 years ago, um, if like they was going to let anybody out of prison, I would have never said Joey and Anthony.
I thought they let Carmine out before them.
Yeah, well, they still deem well. Carmine was trying to get out because when you do so much time and you're at a certain age, if
You
they
can get out
deem you're
compassion.
not a
Yeah.
danger to society, but he was still the Colombo boss. They
Yeah.
wouldn't name a new boss until he died, and he's running business off the phones. You know, so Carmine wasn't getting out. But yeah, on the Joey, they when I was in Butner, they had a book came out. It was called
Murder machine.
Murder Machine, and it hit the compound,
Yep.
and Joey didn't like it, so he gave us books of stamps to go around and buy up all the copies of the books.
Why didn't he like it?
Uh, he he didn't like the person that wrote it, and he said it was a bunch of lies, and he just didn't want it out on the compound.
I've actually got it. Murder machine.
That's it. Yes.
It's pretty fucking brutal.
Yeah.
All the shit that's in there. It's
Yeah. And man, I'll tell you what, um, Joey Joey was probably one of the scariest people I ever met. He was a he was a very nice guy to me. Okay. But when you would meet Joey and like you'd talk to him and he had a big old toothy smile, and he'd smile, but his eyes, there was nothing there. I mean, there was no sparkle, there was no soul. They were like shark's eyes, just black. And to see somebody smile from here down and nothing from here up, that's frightening.
yeah, there's a few people in that, whole genre that they say are like that. Vito Genovese was one referred to as he had those type of eyes. Neil Delacroix was another one that's
Yeah.
referred to as having those type of eyes. And, I know what you're talking about. And that's what did you have a lot of dealings with? It seems like you were obviously very close with Carmen. Did you have a lot of dealings with Joey? And
Well,
what was he like?
I did Joey's laundry, and Joey paid me. And here's like something: he had a surprise visit one day, so they sent up his uniform for me to get all creased up for him. So I took it down, gave it to somebody to put it into Joey's um, room for his visit. So 2 days later, somebody comes up to my unit with a big bag of Taster's Choice coffee, and he goes, "This is from Joey." And I'm like, what the hell? He pays me. So I saw him at dinner and I said, "Joey, you don't have to send no coffee up to me. You pay me." He goes, "Well, you're always there for me, Crease." And I'm like, "Well, thanks." I mean, he was on different time than Carmine, even though they hung out. Joey at the time, he had cancer. So it was in the remission, and that's why he was at the medium. And Joey was in good shape. He used to lift and everything, and he was kind of yoked. So
Yeah.
Joey would lift, and he'd play handball a lot. And Carmine ain't going to be playing handball or nothing. Us two fat guys, we're going to sit and play pinochle and watch the handball games.
Was Did you ever see Joey get into it with anybody? Because
No,
obviously I knew that because I'm into this genre. You knew who he was, but you think an average Joe that knows nothing of that life comes in there, they don't know who the hell Joey Testa is.
yeah. Um, Butner was a spot that was there was only 900 people in the compound. It was like a college campus.
Okay.
Okay. And now I'm not saying anything bad about Joey at all. And I'm sure you've heard stories on other podcasts
Oh,
to
yeah.
where Joey Joey talked to the cops a lot,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying anything bad, but like, somebody told the story how Joey like screamed out in the chow hall, I'd stick up for the cops over 99% of these assholes in this prison. I mean, so Joey was just a little standoffish, and I'm sure Carmine was to other people too, but that's just how it was. I mean, I wasn't close with Joey. I mean, we would talk and everything, but I mean, just totally different time, you
Right.
know. But I mean, he was a nice guy to me. He never did anything wrong. But no, nobody was going to mess with Joey. He was like a legend there.
How did you land that prison?
Pardon me?
How did you land going to that prison?
Well, because I was at the medical center at Butner, so I wanted to transfer.
Right.
So
But how
so
did
it,
you get
so
there, I guess? How did you
so
get to the
instead of
medical
putting
center?
all the paperwork in, they said you just want to go next door. I
How
said
did you get
sure.
to how did you get to the medical center part of it?
Um, they they wanted me to get an evaluation the judge put in because of my crime of never doing anything wrong to all of a sudden robbing three banks. They wanted to see like if I had a breakdown or depression, and
I
I
want to see
got
if you
there and I
elected.
talked to the doctor the first time I was there in R&D, and he goes, there ain't nothing wrong with you. I said, I told him there's nothing wrong with me. But I mean, that was just what what the judge ordered. She wanted to see if there was anything, depression or anything like that.
Okay.
So,
So if people are listening along, you talked about an incident that happened in prison not too long ago, but in your initial arrest, you said you got 13 years, which you've done close to all of that for different
yes,
reasons. So
yes.
obviously you got out and you made your way back there.
I
When you got out, when did you get out? What year was that?
Okay. I got out in 2015, and jobs were very hard for me. See, I was kind of naive in the fact that I thought with my work history, with the good jobs I had, would kind of weigh out the charges.
Right.
Well, it didn't. Like, I was the area supervisor of a pizza place. I couldn't even get a job delivering pizzas. You know, Nobody would hire me. So, a friend of mine that I knew in Beaumont, Texas, who I was down there with, Michael Roccaforte and them. Um, so this guy Johnny, I was good friends with. He had me going out to California, picking up a little smoke and bringing it back. So he
Okay.
paid me, and it got to be the holidays, and I got depressed, and I was dating somebody, so I took her gun and I went to the first bank I robbed, and I just wanted to see that bank, and I walked in it, and I said, I can't do this. And I walked out, and a woman recognized me from 13 years ago and called the police, and I got arrested for having a weapon under disability. So I did 18 months in the state of Ohio.
Dang.
I got out in 2017. My kids didn't want anything to do with me anymore. I was pretty much alone. The holidays came, and I thought to myself, I was I was happier in prison. I mean, I was institutionalized. I was like, I didn't think I belonged in the world anymore, you know? So I actually robbed the bank that I banked at, hit the teller on a Friday, and that Monday I went to my PO's office knowing I was going to get arrested.
And they
And
arrested you.
yeah, so I did 7 on that one. I got out of February of 24, but I did it on purpose to go back because I just didn't think I belonged here anymore.
What I mean, not that it really is a huge deal, but what did you get out of that one money wise?
Oh, I just got a couple $1,000s. I just hit the teller. I did
You
some.
wanted it just to go back.
Yeah, yeah. I just did it to go back.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what did they just wait to pick you up when you went
No,
back and check in with the VO?
No, I went to my PO's office that next Monday, and he knew I had robbed the bank, and they got the marshal's office at the bottom of the federal courthouse. So then a couple FBI agents came in and arrested me, and that was it. I mean, I knew it was going to happen. I didn't go on the run. I went there knowing I was going to get arrested.
Right.
And
That's not as uncommon as you might think. I've heard a number of stories where people do long stretches in prison, and when they get out for whatever, maybe they've severed communication with their families. Maybe it's them that have severed it, but they just, they feel like they have nothing, and they had stronger relationships and bonds and ties in prison.
yeah, because I mean, you're in prison, and it was like I was out in Beaumont, Texas. I told you out there with Michael Roccaforte. There was about 11 of us Italians. We all hung together, and I mean, it was like a family. I mean, you're closer to them than you are anybody else out in the real world. I mean, those are your family. You
Yeah.
laugh together, you cry together, you eat together. I mean, and it's kind of, you remember in the Shawshank Redemption when Morgan
Brooks.
Freeman talks about the walls. He
Yeah.
goes, at the beginning you fear them, then you accept them, and then you depend on them.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was true. I mean, jobs were almost impossible for me. Um, like my kids, when I went back to prison, they didn't want anything to do with me anymore. I felt I didn't have anybody out here anymore. I mean, I had friends that have been my friends my whole life, but they got their own families, and I was just like, I was better off in prison. But I tell you what, it was not the same prison that I left,
Right.
because that's when all them young kids with the knives and all the dope in there and all the white guys smoking the paper with roach spray and everything. I mean, it is not the same BOP, and I will
Roach,
never go back.
roach spray.
Oh my God, yeah, they'd smoke anything, that like K2 and that Deuce, and I mean, they was actually smoking paper with roach spray sprayed on it.
What the fuck?
Yeah, I mean, they'll smoke anything in
I've
there.
seen videos of people that have, or at least that's what they say they've done, is that K2. I don't even know what that is, but it looks like they're possessed by a fucking demon.
Oh my goodness. Um, we used to say they would get stuck because they couldn't move, and
Yeah, they were contort.
the
Yeah.
drool would just be coming out. And what it is it's paper, and they just like dip it in this liquid and let it dry, and then they write the letters on it. And they can't test for K2, so if you do it, it's not going to show up on a random drug test.
Wow.
Yeah. So dope is bad. The young kids with the knives, and it's just like it just wasn't. I mean, I hate to say it just wasn't fun anymore.
I,
You know?
but I understand what you're saying though, because I interviewed a guy. He's a good friend of mine. His name is Matt Cox, and he went to. I'm going to try to get you on his podcast at some point. He's got a good program, large program, and he done. I think he wound up doing like 13 years. And he said there was a point where there's a bunch of guys. They were sitting around. They were playing some board game. I forgot what it was. And he was like, he said, throughout my whole life, and he was doing mortgage fraud, stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars. And he said, he was sitting there laughing, and he thought, this is the first time in my life that I'm happy. And he was like, I had all this shit on the outside. I had money, I had cars, I had women. He said, but everybody wanted something from me. He was like, the women wanted the money. The people wanted me to cut them in on action. Everybody wants money to help you do this or that or whatever, get new identities, whatever the case. He said it was the first time that nobody wanted anything from me. I wasn't on the run. I wasn't nervous about getting caught. I was kind of in the middle of my time. I was coasting. And he was like, I felt at that moment I was as happy as I'd ever been. And he was like, I don't know if he said I think he said somebody told him, he was like, believe it or not, you're going to miss this place.
And
when you're going. Said he was like, "You're out of your fucking mind. When I'm out of here, I'm not gonna miss this place."
hey,
And he's
yeah, I'll tell you what. There is nothing better than a Saturday or Sunday during football season in prison.
really.
Oh my God, the
They say that's
football
how the
kid.
time goes by too when you're waiting for those 6 months. That's like the
Listen,
fastest
as
time you
soon
can
as
do.
September hits, that year is over.
Mhm.
Because you got fantasy football you're playing tickets, talking shit with the guys. I mean, you got a game on every TV.
Yeah.
It's it's like it's like almost being at the sports bar without the chicken wings and the girls.
But
Because there's
he's
still drink there, but
oh, yeah.
but
He he
yeah,
said
but
when he left
you
that prison, when they were leaving, he wound up getting out, and he said he's driving off, and he's looking at the gates, and he said he started crying,
yeah,
and said his family was looking. I was like, "Why are you crying? No, you're out. You haven't." He was just like, I just like he said, he had left a bunch of people that he just connected with, and he was like,
that he
he said,
loved.
"I
Yeah,
did, yeah, that he loved," and he said, "I did miss it." He says, "The craziest fucking thing you'd ever hear that I missed being in prison."
yeah,
But, it's
it's
just like
true.
anything else, you're behind the walls, but you gotta make relationships and you gotta make the time go by. Even if you're in a job you hate, you're still gonna befriend some of the people. It's the
Yeah,
same principles.
and I tell you what's also kind of weird is in prison I was Jimmy the Crease.
Yeah.
You know, I was somebody. I get out, I'm a piece of shit ex bank robber. And nobody cares about Jimmy the Crease on the street. But in prison, with my crime, highly respected. You know, I mean, I don't know, but I tell you, I'm over it now. I
Yeah.
will I will never go back ever.
It just really puts it in perspective, like what you just said. I couldn't have worded that any better that, when in there, you were somebody and you were known for that and you were appreciated for that. You were compensated for that. People came to you for that. And then when you get out, it's so hard to find employment, which is why the recidivism rate is so high because people do reoffend to get, or, even to make money. Like you said, you moved a little, green for the guy. People can't get jobs. They got to make a fucking living.
Yeah,
So sometimes they go back to that. Then they get caught. Now they're in there for a second time. They do a longer stretch. Sometimes they wind up doing 3 strikes. It is so hard to get a job when you have a record. Look, I was arrested and charged. I spoke with you about this. I had a pending charge. Now, granted, it was murder, so it was a pretty big one, but you know, I couldn't get a job nowhere. In nowhere would I tried Uber, Lyft, nothing. Everything was boom, 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 negative, 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 negative. The only reason I got a job was there was a sign company that needed some help very bad. And the company that I was fired from right after I got charged was a very, very prominent steel company. So there was such a small gap of employment. He said, "Why would you want to leave, $100,000 plus a year job and come to work for me? I can't pay you that much." And right then and there, I knew that he hadn't run my background or anything like that because he's asking why I'm doing. I said, "Look, man," I said, "honestly," I said, my son is getting in the age of playing football sports. I want to be able to be there and which that wasn't a lie. Be a little bit more involved, and I can't do it working this job. It's swing shift, it's nights, it's weekends. I know I got to take a pay cut, but I just want to be a little bit more hands on and be around him." And he was like, "Yeah, I get that, man. It's understandable." And he hired me on the spot. Had it not been because this was a mom and pop operation, if it had to run through corporate or anywhere else, they wouldn't have fucking hired me.
HR,
But
you can't get through HR.
exactly. But the thing was, and I'm grateful to that guy for giving me that opportunity, but it was much less than what I knew I was worth.
Yes.
I went from making 100,000+ a year to like 40,000 a year.
Yeah.
And that's a big fucking cut. And I mean, to him, to his credit, he told me, he's like, "Look, I can't pay you what you're making there." And I was like, "I don't care. I just
Yeah.
needed a job." Like you said, I needed some income coming in. I didn't give a shit what it was.
Yes.
But it's so hard for people to get that because in my case, I had left that job within a couple weeks and applied for this. But if you have to go away for 3 years and there's a 3-year employment gap, it's so hard, man.
Oh, that's it's impossible, especially now because they they can't ask you, have you been convicted of a crime? But then when you put your last job is 7 years ago, 8 years ago, well, where you been? You
Yeah.
know?
And it almost forces people to lie and make up stuff like, done my own business or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. And it's also my crime, even though in prison it's respected, out here it's considered theft and violence. And
Right.
even though I didn't hurt anybody, and I never was going to hurt anybody,
Right.
it's considered theft and violence.
And I think me and you talked about this in the phone conversation, but we had, but a really interesting case was there was a movie called Masterminds with
Yes.
Matt Galifianakis, and it was about a guy named David Gant. He's one of the first people I ever interviewed. I think he was like my third interview on my podcast, and he was the actual guy that robbed that. Now this was like the Loomis Fargo, I don't know, like headquarter bank, if you will. It's where that it wasn't a bank. You couldn't walk into there and do a transaction. They actually housed the money that the trucks would load up and carry to the
Yes.
bank. And he was like the head security guard, or not security guard, but head manager or whatever it was there. So he wraps up for the night. He's letting the last person go out. All right, I'll see you, Monday morning or whatever the case may be. He gets in his car like he's leaving. He goes back in. He loads up $18 million and then shoots off, winds up going to Mexico. A lot of stuff happened. He wound up getting caught. But
Yeah.
all things considered, he didn't get a ton of time because, like we talked about, he didn't brandish a firearm. He just loaded his shit up and left.
Mm-hmm.
It was more or less like a very high charge of breach of contract.
Right.
Because what he told me, he was like, it didn't matter if I stole, it was a certain amount, but he's like, once you steal over that amount, your time didn't go up. So he was like, if I'm gonna steal 100,000, I'll just say 100,000. If you steal 100,000, but it's no more time difference if I steal 18 million, you might as well take the 18 million.
Yeah.
But those are the little nuances, like you said, brandishing a firearm or not, that can mean years difference when it comes to time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, I mean, you've got a very interesting story. Your story really could be a movie, to be quite
Well,
honest.
if I can, I'd like to give a little bit of credit to somebody. Her name is Dr. Leslie Dobson. For some reason, I got on that job site LinkedIn, right? And I was just looking around and I saw all these people advertising as prison consultants. And I'm thinking, okay, well, if anybody knows about prison, it's me. So I put my profile on there and I was straight honest. That's the one thing about me now. I mean, I will I will tell the truth about my past in a minute. I won't hide from it. So I put, rob banks, befriended by a mafia boss, I lived with a serial killer. So this Dr. Leslie Dobson finds me on there and she's got a podcast on iHeartRadio that's called Intentionally Disturbing. So she writes me and says, "You'd be awesome on my podcast." So she called me one Friday night and we talked for about an hour. And she said, "Would you mind if I gave your phone number to some of my producer friends out here in California?" And I'm like, "No, anything you can do." So she got me hooked up with Jason Wolf, who's the son of Dick Wolf, the guy behind all the Law and Orders.
Yeah.
And
And all the Chicago PD,
yeah,
Chicago
and
Fire,
and
Chicago Med, all that shit.
and Jason Wolf is going to do a TV series with me.
Wow. Highlighting your
And
life.
and I've got a book. She's got me hooked up with a publishing company that my book that I'm writing about the bank robberies, and they're saying they're going to probably turn that into a movie.
Your whole story of it's like you weren't brought up as a criminal.
No,
You
and
know,
they
you
say I'm a likable bank robber because I didn't
right,
touch a drug. You know,
didn't hurt anybody, didn't
I
shoot
didn't
anybody,
steal
didn't take
grandma's
hostages.
pension check. It was
Right.
like it was a guy who basically had a breakdown and started robbing banks.
Look, I'll guarantee you if you took a survey of everybody in the United States of America right now, like times are tough. People inflation's through the fucking
Everybody
roof.
thinks of robbing a bank.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. You're telling me the average person is living paycheck to paycheck, probably in a hole, probably got credit card debt, is praying they can make it to the gas station to fill up to get to work the next day, got kids with braces or, whatever. They're squeezing quarters to the eagle screams. If you told them they could go in and in 5 minutes rob a bank and come out with 90 grand and nobody got hurt and they had a, just say 90%, hell, 70% chance of getting away with it, a lot of people probably fucking do it.
Absolutely.
And
And
you can't say that you're not, because you're not doing it to be mean, you're not doing it to be a criminal, you're doing it to keep afloat and live in society. And it's bad that the world is that, terrible right now as far as pricing and shit, that you have to think of it like that.
exactly. And see that she's the one who got me doing all these videos. She said, I want you to post videos on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok because she's got about 400,000 followers. So
Right.
she's like, when you do my show, you're going to blow up.
Yeah.
So that's where all this came from. It was
Have
her.
have somewhere to go for them to find you.
Yeah, because I knew, well, I didn't know, but I mean I know if I'm ever going to make anything in my life, it's going to have to be on my own. It's not going to be with a company or something.
Right.
And everybody needs a little help. And her finding me was, I mean, I've seen a lot of bad in the world. I'm the Italian Catholic. I go to mass Easter and Christmas, you
Yeah.
know, but she found me for a reason,
Yeah.
and she's been fantastic with me and has got all these opportunities. Without her, I wouldn't be on your show.
Right. And
So
that's something I'll tell you, Jimmy, just maybe this can, throw some positive light and some hope for you. A lot of guys that are in this podcast industry, obviously you got guys like Joe Rogan and, stuff like that that aren't career criminals, but a lot of people that have podcasts. The gentleman I was just talking about, Matt Cox, he was a mortgage fraudster. He done 13 years in prison. He got out. He was working as a janitor in a gym. He happened to speak with the guy at the gym, and he was telling him all he did. The guy, hooked him up with this guy that had a good podcast around the area. And he's like, yeah, man, your story would make a great podcast. He's been in jail 13 years. You don't know what the fucking podcast is. He
right, I
does it.
didn't know.
He does a podcast that goes viral, gets over 1 million views. And that guy's like, man, you're great on the mic. You're great telling your story. It's interesting. You should do your own podcast. And he's like, I don't know anything about it. I don't have equipment. I just got out of jail. Eventually he gets it together. Now, man, that dude is killing it. I don't want to put his business out in the street, but I mean, he's making a lot of money
Yeah,
doing this. And he does 4 podcasts. He drops like 4 podcasts a week. Great dude. He's invited me to his house a couple times.
yeah,
Great guy. So just because you're coming from a bad situation, there's ways you can spend that in the positives.
yeah,
There's a number of people that have great high platforms. Johnny Mitchell with the Connect, Ian Bick, locked in with Ian Bick, all guys that got locked up, done time, have got out, and are now in the podcast game. So
yeah,
I think this is something that you can grab a hold to, even if the TV and the books. I mean, I pray that those things come through for you.
yeah.
Don't overlook the podcast game to getting into it as a guest or talking about it. You got a
See, I
good.
haven't really thought about doing one. I love to do them, like with you and with OG Mike, and Mike's trying to get me on a couple of bigger ones,
Right.
because I had something really bad happen to me when I got out of prison. Um, I came to live with my older sister. I hadn't seen her in 25 years, and so she said I could come and stay with her. And since I've been out, I've had 3 major surgeries. I've had a shoulder reconstruction. I had the right knee replaced, and I had the left knee replaced April 1st. And about 3 weeks ago, I woke up from a nap and walked out to the living room, and I found my sister dead.
Oh man.
And after the initial shock came up, I'm like, oh my God, where am I going to live? What's going to happen to me? Because this was my only place to live. So I got an older brother in Oklahoma City. We talked to the apartment people. Dr. Leslie wrote a letter of recommendation, and the apartment people are going to take a chance on me and let me stay here. And my brother's going to help with the rent, and I'm going to do whatever I can if it's selling plasma. I got my SSI hearing August the 5th, and Mike said he's going to do what he can to maybe get me on a couple of the podcasts that pay.
Yeah.
And so it was the worst case scenario because of all the good that was happening for me, lining
Right.
up. And then that happened and just broke my heart because my sister, she was like a mom growing up to me. She protected me from my abusive mom. And I mean, and I'm glad I got to spend this time with her. And but it just shows you that no matter how good things going, something can still slap you down.
Yeah. And it
And
don't take but a second.
and I never once thought of going back to prison.
That's good. And
Yes. So
Jimmy, you've got a hell of a story, man. And I think people need to hear it because the biggest thing with you is it's relatable. It's a
yeah,
problem that everybody, no matter your race, your religion, or nothing, like unless you're just born into a wealthy ass family, it's a problem that I think every lower to middle class individual has faced in their lifetime of,
yeah.
having financial difficulties, struggling with families. Maybe not everybody had a stripper on the side, but you still get you
Well,
get the
they're missing out.
yeah.
Yeah. Listen, I tell everybody I'm not proud of what I did, but I'm not ashamed of it. And yes, I made bad choices, and I should have just divorced my wife, kept my good job I had, sucked it up, But sometimes things happen. Sometimes you pick that wrong path,
Yeah.
and I did, and um, I'm not blaming anything. I don't blame my childhood on it. I don't say, "Oh, my mom beat me. That's why I robbed banks." Got nothing to do with it. You
Yep.
know, I made these choices, and I live with that.
Well, Jimmy, you're a man's man. I'll steal a quote to close this interview out from Chris Colombo when he told me. He said, "When you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there."
It sure
And
does.
so that I think that's a good way to close this out. Before we get out of here, tell everybody where they can go follow you on social media.
Well, you can find me on YouTube at at Jimmy the Crease. You could find me on TikTok at Jimmy the Crease and Instagram.
All right, we will put links for all of those in our show notes for people to go check out, follow along. Jimmy, I really appreciate you coming on the show, sharing your story. It's been a fantastic interview, my friend. I
Wade, I
wish you nothing but
appreciate it.
the best. Yes, sir.
Really
And,
appreciate it.
we'll keep in touch going forward, man. Definitely 100%. But I want to thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Ladies and gentlemen, that'll do it for this episode of Crime and Entertainment. Tune in next week, Jimmy. We appreciate it, my friend.
All right, buddy.
Thank you.